Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we are tackling a really interesting one, React 17. You might remember this as the No New Features release. Sounds kind of weird, right? A major version bump with nothing new for developers? Well, it turns out this release was actually one of the most important updates React has ever had. So, let's get into why.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about that whole no new features thing. Then, we'll look at the big problem it was meant to solve. We'll dive into the technical stuff, event delegation, the new JSX transform, cover the breaking changes, and wrap up with why React 17 really matters.
All right, first up, the puzzle of progress. So yeah, this was the question everybody was asking. Why would you release a major new version with literally no new features for developers to use? It seems backwards, right? But the thing is, the reason was super strategic. It wasn't about giving us new toys to play with. It was about something much bigger, rebuilding React's foundation to get it ready for the future.
And to really get that strategy, you have to understand the massive problem the React team was trying to solve. I'm talking about the all-or-nothing upgrade trap.
Okay, so this is the absolute core of it. The old way of upgrading React was a nightmare for big projects. It was all or nothing. Imagine you have a massive, sprawling application. To get the latest features, you had to upgrade the entire thing in one go. It was a huge, expensive, and frankly terrifying project. A lot of older code bases just got stuck. They couldn't upgrade. React 17 completely changes the game. It introduces gradual upgrades. Now you can upgrade your app piece by piece. It makes it possible to have, say, a React 17 component tree living safely inside a React 16 app.
And this quote from the React team says it all. They call it a stepping stone release. I love that phrasing. It's not the destination, it's the bridge that gets you there. It's the foundation that makes all those future gradual upgrades even possible. The whole point was to make sure React could keep innovating without leaving its biggest, most critical applications stuck in the past.
So the big question is, how did they actually do it? How do you get two different versions of React to play nice on the same web page? Well, the magic is all under the hood, and it comes down to a really clever change in how React handles events. All right, quick detour for a concept called event delegation. It's a smart performance trick React has used forever. Instead of putting a click listener on every single button, link, and div in your app, which would be super slow, React just slaps one listener way up at the top. When you click something, the event bubbles up and that one listener catches it and figures out where it came from. Now, here's the crucial difference. In React 16 and all the versions before it, where did React attach that listener? To the global document object, the very top of the page. And that was the problem. If you had two different React versions on one page, they'd both be fighting for control of the document's event listeners. It was a recipe for disaster. So what did React 17 do? It stopped attaching events to the document. Instead, it attaches them to the root DOM element where your React app is actually rendered. It's a subtle change, but the impact is massive. It means each React app, even if there are multiple versions, lives in its own little bubble. No more fighting. It's what makes the whole gradual upgrade thing safe.
Okay, next up, let's talk about something you'll actually notice in your day-to-day coding, the new JSX transform.
So, React 17 brought in support for a new JSX transform. And the big headliner here, the thing that made everyone happy, is that you can finally use JSX without having to import React at the top of every single file. It's a small thing, but it's a great quality of life improvement. Plus, it can lead to slightly smaller bundle sizes, which is always nice.
And here's what that looks like in practice. Before, you had that mandatory import React from React. Why? Because under the hood, Babel was turning your h1 tag into a react.createElement function call. With the new transform, you can just delete that import. Your code is cleaner. What's happening now is that Babel is smarter. It automatically imports a special JSX function from a new react/JSX-runtime package behind the scenes. So the React variable itself doesn't need to be in scope anymore. Pretty cool.
And you know what? Switching to this is super easy. You just need to be on the right versions of React and Babel, then you pop one little setting into your Babel config, runtime automatic. That's pretty much it. They even made a script you can run that will go through your whole project and delete all those old unnecessary import React lines for you. Super convenient.
All right, now let's get to the fine print. Even though React 17 was all about making upgrades easier, it is still a major version. And that means, yep, there are a few breaking changes you really need to know about.
First up, and this is a big one, event pooling is gone, completely removed. Now, this was an old performance hack from back in the day. The idea was to reuse event objects to save memory. But honestly, in modern browsers, it just wasn't necessary anymore, and it caused a ton of confusing bugs for developers.
So what does this mean for you? It means you can finally stop worrying about that weird ePersist function. You know how if you tried to access an event property inside a set timeout in React 16, it would blow up because the event object got nullified? Well, that's gone. Now it just works. The event object behaves exactly how you'd expect it to. It's so much more predictable.
Okay, the next breaking change is a little more subtle, but it's super important for consistency. It's all about the timing of the cleanup function in useEffect. Previously, the cleanup would run synchronously. In React 17, it now runs asynchronously, after the browser has painted the update to the screen.
And this flow shows you exactly why that matters. In React 16, you could get into weird race conditions where your component re-renders, but the cleanup function for the old effect hadn't run yet. This could lead to some really nasty bugs with stale state. With React 17, the order is much more logical. The render happens, the old effect's cleanup runs, and then the new effect runs. It guarantees that the cleanup is finished before the next effect starts, which just makes everything way more predictable and less buggy.
And finally, a quick rundown of some other changes. The on-scroll event doesn't bubble anymore, which fixes a common point of confusion. OnFocus and OnBlur now use the native browser events under the hood, which is great for consistency. Oh, and returning undefined from a component is now an error, which makes sense. Just return null if you want to render nothing. And maybe best of all, the component stack traces are way better now, making debugging in production so much less painful. These are all just smart little changes to make React behave more like the web platform itself.
So let's wrap this all up. After all that, why does this quiet little release matter so much?
Here's the bottom line. React 17 wasn't about building a flashy new extension on the house. It was about fixing the foundation. It was a sign that the framework was maturing, shifting its focus from just adding cool new features to making sure the entire ecosystem was stable, healthy, and built to last.
So the big takeaways are these. It killed that awful all-or-nothing upgrade problem. It made React play way better with other tools and libraries, and most importantly, it paved the way for the future. Without the foundation of React 17, we couldn't have gotten all the cool concurrent features in React 18, at least not without leaving a huge chunk of the community behind. It prioritized stability, and in doing so, it secured React's future.
Which leaves us with one final question to think about. By focusing on this kind of interoperability instead of just features, did React 17 actually set a new standard for how all mature frameworks should evolve? Maybe the most innovative feature you can add is the one that makes sure you're still relevant 10 years from now. Thanks for joining this explainer.